Hello, dear friends of freedom. The Insider has compiled a brief chronicle of the war in Ukraine in the words of its instigators, participants, perpetrators, victims, observers, and heroes. Based on that, I have added quite a few additional quotes that I found worth mentioning. The result is a chronicle of the war based on quotes of some of its key figures. I added a Google Docs file which contains the sources to every quote in the description of this video. Furthermore, I left out any personal opinion of mine as I think the quotes speak for themselves as to who chose the right side of history. Let's go. January. Russia is not going to attack anyone. The UK Foreign Office. We have information indicating that the Russian government is seeking to install a pro-Russian leader in Kiev as it considers the invasion and occupation of Ukraine. Sergei Lavrov, Foreign Minister of Russia since 2004, to the US Secretary of State. You are saying that we are going to attack Ukraine, although we have repeatedly explained that this is not so. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. There is no risk of a large-scale war that could unfold in Europe or somewhere else. We do not intend to take any aggressive action. We do not intend to attack or invade Ukraine. The Russian Embassy in the USA. We emphasize once again, Russia is not going to attack anyone. The practice of moving troops on our own soil is our sovereign right. We call for an end to hysterics and not to escalate tensions around the Donbas problem. And the main thing is not to push the hotheads in Kiev to new provocations. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. President Putin has created this crisis by amassing 100,000 Russian soldiers along the Ukrainian border. We have reached such a level of tension that Russia is ready at any moment to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff of the United States. Given that forces are assembled, ground maneuver troops, artillery, ballistic missiles, air force, if all this is used together against Ukraine, something very serious will happen, which will lead to a significant number of victims. You can imagine how it will look in densely populated areas, near roads and so on. It can be just awful. Volodymyr Zelensky. What, in fact, is the news? Hasn't this been reality for 8 years now? Didn't the invasion start in 2014? Has the threat of a large-scale war appeared only now? And now they are actively attacking not our land, but our nerves, so that you have a constant feeling of anxiety. All our citizens, especially the elderly, need to understand this. Exhale and calm down. Do not run for buckwheat and matches. What should you do? Only one thing. Keep calm, cool-headed, confident in our army, in our Ukraine. And I am sure that in my next New Year's address, I will say, Dear Ukrainians, well, what did I say? We are great. We didn't panic. We did not allow them to provoke us. We were calm, strong, and we will welcome the next New Year without panic, without horror, hopefully virus-free, and I sincerely believe, without war. Boris Johnson, at that time Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. We agreed that we would respond in a coordinated manner to any Russian attack on Ukraine, in a coordinated way by imposing tough joint sanctions that will be tougher than all the measurements that we have previously imposed on Russia. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Ukraine does not pose a threat to Russia. It is the idea of a democratically stable Ukraine that is a problem for the Kremlin. The risk of conflict is high. Russia's aggressive actions undermine security in Europe. NATO will conduct a substantive dialogue with Russia in a spirit of goodwill. However, one must be prepared for the possibility that diplomacy will fail. Aggression against Ukraine will entail serious consequences for Russia. Maria Pevchikh and Georgy Alburov, members of Alexei Navalny's team, during the one-year anniversary video of the investigation video of Putin's multi-billion-dollar palace. So he tried to kill Navalny, just to make it stop. Stop the investigations that he released, stop the politics, posts, broadcasts, streams. Stop the laughter and contempt caused by this old dictator, the richest man in the world, who has stolen so much that he can afford anything. Yet he used that money to build himself a strip hall, an aqua discotheque, and a personal beer restaurant. To stop the hatred that is impossible not to feel towards the shiny United Russia members who are bursting with stolen money, and to stop the investigation about Putin's palace is why he will never release Navalny voluntarily. He will increase his terms, invent new criminal cases, humiliate him in prison, and create unbearable conditions because it's personal. The palace is his most important and favorite brainchild, which Navalny ruined, but he won't succeed. While Alexei is in prison, we continue to do his work. While sitting in his place, we continue to say clearly and understandably Putin is an insignificant douchebag, a thief, and a liar. He fancies himself the successor of great Russia, a monarch, an aristocrat. He wants to live in a place no worse than the Winter Palace. He sets up double-headed eagles everywhere to emphasize that he is the heir to the Russian Tsar. But it turns into a parody. Not even a bad copy, but just a meaningless, never-ending construction project with statues of naked women sticking out of the walls and fancy chairs placed right in front of toilet bowls. Putin really wants to remain in history, to be remembered as an outstanding political leader who outplayed everyone. But he will be remembered for this, for his moldy palace in Gelendzhik with a strip club, and also for his cowardice and panic fear of his opponents, for his unwillingness to engage in an open, normal political competition. He will be remembered for the fact that instead of defeating Navalny in open and fair elections, he came up with the idea of smearing his underpants with Novichok so that Navalny would die painfully. Instead of answering direct, understandable questions, he lies in the eyes of the entire population, and he imprisons those who expose his lies. This is Putin's real legacy. We will definitely defeat him. Don't be afraid of anything, never give up, believe in your rightness. Freedom for Alexei Navalny. February. Russian warship, go F yourself. Dmitry Peskov, press speaker of the Kremlin, 5 days before the invasion, on camera answering the question if and when Russia will invade Ukraine. These daily predictions of a date at which Russia will supposedly invade Ukraine are a very bad practice. That's why we call for common sense. We call for them to ask themselves, what kind of sense would it make for Russia to attack another country? We call for them to remember history. Come on. As we have seen recently, people in the West aren't very good when it comes to historic memory. That's why we remind them that Russia in its entire history has never attacked any other country. Russia, a country that has suffered through so many wars, is the last country that wants to speak of or even dare to pronounce the word war. Donald Trump on the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show on February 23, 2022. Putin's decision to declare parts of Ukraine as independent was genius, smart, and wonderful. Vladimir Putin on the 24th of February, shortly after the start of the full-scale invasion. Our plans do not include the occupation of Ukrainian territories. We are not going to impose anything on anyone by force. We will strive for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky.
The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride.
Alexei Navalny. This war is designed to divert attention from Russia's inner problems. I consider those who unleashed this war to be bandits and thieves. A female Ukrainian resident of Henichensk in the Kherson region, while talking to a Russian invader. You are occupiers, you are fascists. Why the hell did you come with weapons to us? Put sunflower seeds in your pockets so at least the sunflowers will sprout when you will lie down here. Ukrainian border guard. Russian warship, go F yourself. The chief officer of a Georgian tanker vessel to a Russian ship via radio signal. You will not get any fuel here. If you run out of fuel, you can use oars. Ewan Watson, head of the International Committee of the Red Cross. For ordinary people, it's an apocalyptic situation. They are running out of basic necessities. Is it a matter of life and death? It is definitely a matter of life and death. It is very important that humanitarian aid gets to Mariupol and other cities that are now in the epicenter of the conflict as soon as possible. Miloš Zeman, President of the Czech Republic. I said that the Russians are not crazy and will not attack Ukraine. I admit that I was wrong. This madman must be isolated. Alexei Arestovich, advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine. According to our data, the first strike of the Russian Federation failed. March. Here we will bury them. Vladimir Putin. To save people from genocide is the main goal of the special operation in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky. The strike on Kharkiv is a war crime. State terrorism of the Russian Federation. This shows that Russia is a terror state. Pavel Kirilenko, head of the Donetsk region. The city of Volnovakha no longer exists. Deputy Mayor of Mariupol, Sergei Orlov. From 1,000 to 2,000 residents took refuge in the bombed-out building of the Drama Theater. 80 to 90% of the city was bombed. No building is without damage, either destroyed or damaged. Ramzan Kadyrov, Putin's appointed head of the Chechen Republic. I declare that it is necessary to finish what we started, not to stop. We have to go into Kiev and take Kiev back. If my troops would be positioned near Kiev, then we would go to Kiev and put things in order. Once again, we confirm that we are ready to go anywhere to carry out any order of any difficulty. We have learned to fight in order to defend. And so we ask that we be allowed to defend the Ukrainian people from our enemies, the enemies of Islam. Alexander Lukashenko, self-proclaimed president of Belarus, during a press conference. And now I will show you where the attack on Belarus was being prepared from. And if 6 hours before the special operation there wouldn't have been a preemptive strike on their positions, 4 positions, I will now show the map, I brought it, they, that is Ukraine, would have attacked us. Alexei Arestovich, the Russian army is not strong, it's just long. 8 out of 10 of Putin's armies are here. This is where we will bury them. Vladimir Putin addressing mothers, wives, sisters, brides, and girlfriends of Russian soldiers and officers who are now, as he puts it, in the battle of defending Russia during the special military operation. I emphasize that conscript soldiers are not participating in hostilities and will not participate in them, and there will be no additional call-up of reservists. Missions are carried out only by professional troops. They will be steadfast in providing security and peace for the people of Russia. I understand how you are worrying about your loved ones and family members. You can be proud of them, just as the whole country is proud of them and is worrying about them together with you. Lyudmila Narusova, Russian politician and member of the Federation Council of Russia. Conscripts were forced to sign a contract, or they were signed for them. But only in the end it turned out that out of a company of 100 people, 4 survived. Maria Aksyanikova, former editor of the Russian state TV channel Channel 1. Russia is an aggressor country, and the responsibility for this crime lies only on the consciousness of one person, and this person is Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, in recent years, I have been working on Channel 1 doing Kremlin propaganda, and I am now very ashamed of it. Joe Biden. For God's sake, this man cannot stay in power. Vladimir Putin. But any nation, the Russian nation in particular, is able to distinguish true patriots from bastards and traitors, and it'll spit them out like a fly that accidentally flew into their mouths. I'm certain that this necessary and natural self-cleaning of our society will only strengthen our country, our solidarity, our unity, and our readiness to answer any call for action. April. How can you negotiate with a crocodile? Vladimir Putin, at a press conference next to Lukashenko, talking about the Bucha massacre. When it comes to Bucha, I was talking to my colleagues from Western countries. I do it often, and I still do it. When they say Bucha, I ask them, have you been to Iraq? Nobody even cared about it back then. Nobody even noticed. Same as nobody remembers the hundreds of civilians who were killed with one strike while they were on a wedding in Afghanistan. There was silence. There was not such a silence when they organized a provocation in Syria. Later on, it turned out to be a fake, the same fake like in Bucha. And today, Alexander Grigorovich Lukashenko even provided us with the documents that prove it. These documents that he has mentioned to me have been given to our FSB. They show exactly how it happened, who was involved, and on what kind of vehicles they drove into that town. Volodymyr Zelensky. We will establish the full truth about all these monsters in Bucha and Irpin. No matter how much time and effort it takes, we will find everyone. Sergei Lavrov. As a gesture of goodwill, the configuration of troops in the Kharkiv and Kiev region got changed, but this was not appreciated. Immediately, a fake in Bucha was created. This plot was played out the same way as the plot with the Skripals, with the Malaysian Boeing, Navalny, Litvinenko. Alexey Aristovich, those who are on the offense usually don't take trophies. You, with a carpet under your arm, would not just go to advance to Kiev. When they realized that they would begin to retreat and there was nothing to lose, they began to do all of this. Boris Johnson, how can you negotiate with a crocodile when it has your leg in its jaws? Frank-Walter Steinmeier, President of Germany. My commitment to the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline was a clear mistake. We were holding on to bridges that Russia no longer believed in, even though our partners were warning us. Sergei Shoigu, since 2012, Minister of Defense of Russia with zero personal military experience. The United States and controlled Western countries demonstrate intentions to provoke the Kiev regime to fight to the last Ukrainian. Maxim Marchenko, head of the Odessa military administration. Today, the Moskva missile cruiser went exactly where our border guards on Snake Island sent it to. Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General. I was shocked when I was informed that 2 rockets had exploded in the city of Kiev, where I was at that time. This is a dramatic war and we absolutely need to end it. May. Russia is here forever. Ukrainian pensioner who lost everything after the arrival of the Russian invaders was asked what he would say to Russians. Hey you, wake up from Putin's propaganda. We are being killed here. Children are being raped here, bastards. We are burned alive. Have we come to you in Rostov or Voronezh? With misfortune, with grief, with war. Have we done something bad to you? We are simple, hard-working people. You have to wake up. My house burned down today. There's only my dog left, whose name is Filia. I'm from Izum, Kharkiv region, originally from Donetsk. I bought some land here and wanted to retire here. I built the house myself, brought everything in order, built everything according to European standards, and then these stinky, dirty bastards came. They even stole my underwear that was hanging outside on the rope. I cannot say anything anymore. Andrei Turchak, a Russian politician who has served as secretary of the General Council of Putin's political party, United Russia. I wanted to once again address the residents of the Kherson region and say that Russia is here forever. There should be no doubt about that. Alexei Navalny, you will suffer a historic defeat in this stupid war that you started. It has no purpose or meaning. Kirill Budanov, Ukrainian Major General and Chief of the Main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. We can confirm that Putin is in very bad physical and psychological condition. He is very sick. He has various illnesses at the same time, one of which is cancer. Parliament of the Republic of Lithuania, unanimously. The Kremlin regime seeks to destroy the Ukrainian nation. Therefore, such actions should be recognized as a genocide. And Russia is a state that supports and carries out terrorism. Valery Zaluzhny, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. I informed my American colleague about the transition of the Ukrainian Defense Forces to counter-offensive operations in the Kharkiv and Izum directions. Andriy Melnik, Ukrainian ambassador to Germany. Militarily, Berlin simply abandoned Ukraine. They probably lack leadership and courage. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Vladimir Putin has already failed all his strategic goals. Russia's takeover of all of Ukraine is even less real today than it was at the start of the war. Putin cannot be allowed to win his war, and I'm confident he won't win it. Volodymyr Zelensky. For example, Ms. Kissinger emerges from the deep past and says that supposedly it is necessary to give Russia a piece of Ukraine. It seems that Mr. Kissinger does not have 2022 on his calendar, but 1938, and he thinks that he is speaking to the audience not in Davos, but what was then Munich. Sergei Lavrov. Zelensky puts forward this argument. What kind of Nazism can they have if he is a Jew? I may be wrong, but Hitler also had Jewish blood. Some very wise Jewish people once said that the most fanatic anti-Semites are usually Jews. Families have their black sheep, as we say. Alexander Lukashenko. I absolutely believe that the use of nuclear weapons on the territory of Ukraine is unacceptable. Also because it is next to us. Not exactly here, but not across the ocean like the United States either. Atis Pabriks, Minister of Defense and Deputy Prime Minister of Latvia. The Russians now are facing what they haven't had to face in a long time. They have to figure out themselves how they will lose, because they must lose, and they must understand what loss means. They must bear this loss and preserve their dignity and their face. It's not our fault, and it's not our duty to preserve their face. They must learn how to lose, and they must learn how to preserve their dignity, and then sit at the table, and then we can talk. Yuri Shevchuk, a famous Russian musician, on stage at a concert in St. Petersburg. Right now, people are being killed in Ukraine. What for? Our young guys are dying there. What for? What is the goal, friends? Why do Russian and Ukrainian youth have to die again? Elderly people, women, kids are dying just because of some kind of Napoleonic plans of our new Caesar. The motherland, friends, is not the president's ass, which must be honored and kissed all the time. The motherland is the begging grandmother at the station selling potatoes. This is our motherland. June. Goodwill gesture. Mikhail Piotrovsky, director of the world's largest art gallery, Hermitage Museum. On the one hand, war is blood and murder, and on the other hand, it is the self-assertion of people, the self-assertion of a nation. Every person wants to prove himself, and in his position, in relation to the war, undoubtedly, he wants to prove himself. Well, we were all brought up in the imperial tradition, and the empire unites many people. Max Pokrovsky, Russian musician. And if the true color of the nation is so rotten that it cannot get together and sing one anti-war song, and as we know, many do exactly the opposite thing, what can we expect from that nation? Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Security Council and former president of Russia, on his Telegram channel. I am often asked why my Telegram posts are so harsh. The answer is that I hate them. They are bastards and scum. They want death for us, for Russia, and as long as I am alive, I will do everything I can to make them disappear. Vadim Boychenko, mayor of Mariupol. Our cautious estimate, as far as we could still count, is 22,000 civilians who were killed by the occupying forces. This is many times more than Nazi Germany did during the 2 years of occupation. Vladimir Putin, commenting the missile attack on the mall in Kremenchuk with dozens of victims. There was no terrorist attack, no explosion. Nobody at our army shoots or hits random places. As a rule, we only strike targets that we have intel on. I'm sure it was the same in this case. The Russian army does not strike any civilian targets. Igor Konashenkov, representative and chief spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Defense, commenting the retreat from Snake Island. As a gesture of goodwill, the armed forces of the Russian Federation completed their assigned tasks on Snake Island and withdrew their garrison, which had been stationed there. Emmanuel Macron. We must not humiliate Russia, so that when the fighting stops, we can find a way out through diplomatic solutions. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Calls not to allow Russia to be humiliated can only humiliate France or any other country that will call for it, because Russia humiliates itself. We all better focus on how to put the Russian Federation in its place. It will bring back peace and save lives. Colin Kahl, US Deputy Secretary of Defense. HIMARS will allow Ukrainians to get more opportunities for confrontation. Now, the howitzers that we already provided them with earlier can fire at a distance of about 30 kilometers. The range of HIMARS is more than twice as long, which will allow them, even with fewer launchers, to more successfully counter Russian forces. Leo Tolstoy, a quote for which Moscow deputy Pavel Yarilin was fined. And numbed by prayers, preaching, public speeches, processions, paintings, newspapers, cannon fodder, hundreds of thousands of people uniformly dressed with various murder weapons, leaving their parents, wives, children, inflated by youthfulness, but with anxiety in their hearts, they go to where, at the risk of death, they will do the most terrible deed. The murder of people who they do not know and who have done nothing wrong to them. July. We will take and take. Ukrainian children will be ours. Vladimir Putin. It was not Russia that unleashed a war in Ukraine, but the collective West. Everyone should know that we, for the most part, have not even started anything serious against Ukraine yet. An unnamed US Department of Defense official to CNN.
Russia sent about 85% of its army to invade Ukraine. Russian losses amount to thousands of lieutenants and captains, hundreds of colonels, and many generals. Alexei Aristovich, I have one answer. You haven't started, but you are already finishing. All these offensive attempts were very short-lived. A month and a half, and they will die out quietly. They won't be able to advance. Anton Krasovsky, Russian propagandist and at that time presenter, director and moderator of Russia Today, an international news television network funded by the Russian government. There was a discussion about whether a tear of our Russian child is worth a tear of a Ukrainian child. When we return these lands to ourselves and the children become Russian, then we will protect them. We will take, and these kids will be ours. Anna Kuznetsova, Deputy Chairman of the State Duma of the Russian Federation. Since the beginning of the special military operation, the evacuation of more than 2,000 orphans has been carried out from the territory of Ukraine to Russia. Volodymyr Zelensky. The occupiers realize that we are gradually becoming stronger, and the goal of their terror is very simple: to put pressure on our society, intimidate people, and cause maximum damage to Ukrainian cities, while Russian terrorists are still able to do it. So I'm asking you, please don't ignore the air raid signals now. The rules of conduct must be observed at all times, and especially close to objects of public importance. Of course, the day when Russian terror will become impossible will come, but it still needs time. We still have to fight. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The explosions in Olenivka, which led to the death of dozens of captured Ukrainian defenders, are a deliberate provocation and an indisputable act of terrorism on the part of the armed forces of the occupier. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, this was done by mercenaries from PMC Wagner. The organization and implementation of the terrorist attack were not coordinated with the leadership of the Russian Federation Ministry of Defense. The main purpose of this terrorist attack is to conceal the fact of the total theft of funds allocated for the retention of Ukrainian prisoners of war. It is known that on August 1st, a commission from Moscow was supposed to arrive at the object. Ramzan Kadyrov, in a video message on his Telegram channel. We are already developing a plan for the demilitarization of NATO countries, and the first in line after the capture of Kiev is Poland. The demilitarization of Poland will become a reality as quickly as it became a country, if it does not stop barking. Dmitry Chistyakov, former member of the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations. Enough bloodshed. Do not be fooled by the phrase that we will never know the whole truth anyway. It's not so clear. In a world where every step is filmed on an iPhone and every store has a security camera, oblivion will not work. During the Second Chechen War, I pretty soon realized what it was, why it was fought, and due to that I am not a member of any official veteran organization. War is a monster, unworthy of glorification. It always comes with a huge pile of war crimes. Dmitry Kuleba, head of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. Let's first change the situation at the front, and then we will talk with Russia. Everyone understands that negotiations are directly linked to the situation at the front. I tell all my partners simply, Russia must sit down at the negotiation table after the defeat on the battlefield. Otherwise, it will again be the language of ultimatums. August. They drive me mad with their Russophobic hysteria. Volodymyr Zelensky. The most important sanctions are to close the borders, because the Russians are taking away someone else's land. Let them live in their own world until they change their philosophy. Wherever Russians are, send them back to Russia. Then they will understand. They will say, this war has nothing to do with us. The entire population cannot be held responsible, can it? Maybe. But the population has either chosen this government, or does not fight it, or does not argue with it, or does not shout at it. Dmitry Medvedev. European leaders drive me mad with their Russophobic hysteria about Schengen visas to the citizens of our country. Let them introduce a complete visa ban as soon as possible. Daniil Frolkin, former Russian contract soldier who participated in the first days of Russia's invasion and got in touch with a journalist to confess his war crimes while still being in Russia. I understand perfectly well that they will put me in jail for the information I am about to give you, not even for what I have done in Ukraine, but for the information I will give you. I just want to confess everything and explain what is happening in our country. I think it would be better if this war wouldn't have happened in the first place. I am a military serviceman of the Unit 51460, Guard Corporal Frolkin Daniel Andreyevich, and I confess all the crimes I have committed in the town of Andreevka. The executions of the civilian population, the looting of the civilian population, the robbery of their phones. Our commanders do not care about our troops at all. All the ground troops that are fighting at the front. Please, after all of this, take any necessary measurements to punish our commanders for sending our troops to certain death. Deputy Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation Alexander Fomin. The Kiev authorities do not limit themselves to any moral or legal norms. Every day, servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine and national battalions commit crimes that are not properly appreciated by the international community. The shelling of markets, train stations, residential areas, places of distribution of humanitarian aid, and other crowded places continues. Catherine Russell, Director of UNICEF. At least 972 children have been killed or injured in violence since the escalation of the war in Ukraine. And those are just the numbers that the United Nations has been able to verify. Delegation of Ukraine to the European Union. We are grateful to the European Union for joining the case of Ukraine against Russia in the International Court of Justice on charges of genocide. Justice will prevail. Alexei Reznikov, Ukrainian Minister of Defense. The fatigue of the international community from this war could become a new threat to Ukraine. I call it fatigue syndrome, and for me, this is one of the main threats, and we need to work with this threat, because it is very, very dangerous for us. Pavel Filatyev, former Russian paratrooper who participated in the first months of the invasion of Ukraine, author of ZOV. Most of our equipment is outdated and there's just not enough of it, and the complex system of supplying new equipment does not work effectively. Much of it only exists on paper and reports. Our uniforms are uncomfortable and of low quality. Many troops buy European or American gear or even wear Ukrainian uniforms. Why are we, again, just like in 1941, not ready for the modern military reality? Why do millions of men who serve in the army know about it, yet decide to not speak out? Most of the people inside the army are not satisfied with the government, with Putin and his politics, as well as with the military commanders. They are not satisfied with a minister of defense who hasn't even served in the army. Most of the soldiers don't want to kill and don't want to wage a war. But we have been betrayed by patriotism, loss, and a feeling of guilt towards our comrades. Nobody wants to be a coward. We can't throw down our weapons and run. I don't see the kids of our famous propagandists Solovyov, Skabeva, and Kiselyov in the trenches, but I constantly hear them demanding to continue to kill. Is there even a single son of a Russian deputy who actively participates in this war? Are their kids more valuable than the kids of ordinary people? Or do their parents simply don't want their sons to go through what we have gone through? Many of us decided to go there because it was their only chance to earn some money. We all became hostages of many factors, such as revenge, patriotism, money, debt, career, and fear of the government. It's game over for us. We didn't unite Donetsk and Luhansk. We started a horrible war, a war in which cities are destroyed and which leads to the death of elderly people, women, and kids. Donald Trump. Putin would have never gone into Ukraine if I was president. Never. Not even a chance. All I can say is he did not go in while I was president. There was never even a thought of going in. When I wasn't there, it formed, and now you have what you have. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead. Could be millions ultimately. Could be a World War III. Frankly, the way that's going right now, that could end up being World War III. But it would have never happened. You wouldn't have anyone dead. It would have never happened. Olga Stefanishnya, Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. Once upon a time, we wanted to join NATO in order to become part of the collective security system and prevent a big war. Today, the situation is different. A full-scale war continues on the territory of Ukraine, during which NATO, as an organization, has nothing to offer us. We work more individually with the Allied States, and they themselves are more inclined towards bilateral cooperation. Mikhail Podolyak, Ukrainian politician, journalist, negotiator, and advisor to President Zelensky. The massive shelling of Ukraine on Independence Day is another manifestation of the helplessness and terrorist nature of Russian barbarians after 6 months of shame and defeat. Is it still not clear that an attempt to intimidate Ukrainians is an absolute losing idea? Better think about the final goodwill gesture. Volodymyr Zelensky. What is the end of the war for us? We used to say peace. Now we are saying victory. And we do not sit down at the negotiation table out of fear with a gun to our heads. And we will raise our hands only once we celebrate our victory all over Ukraine, because we do not trade our lands or our people. For us, Ukraine is the whole of Ukraine, all 25 regions, without any concessions or compromises. September. Now inhale, and at my command, to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Ura! 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 The Russian Ministry of Defense addressing the retreat from the Kharkiv region. In order to achieve the stated goals of the special military operation to liberate Donbass, a decision was made to regroup the Russian troops stationed in the Balakleya and Izum region to build up efforts in the Donetsk direction. With this goal in mind, within 3 days, an operation was carried out to regroup the Izum-Balakleya units to the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic. During this operation, a number of distractions and demonstrative activities were carried out with the aim to disguise the real actions of our troops. Vladimir Putin. Dear friends, today our military forces, as I already mentioned, are acting on a front line that is longer than 1,000 kilometers. They do not only withstand neo-Nazi formations, but practically the entire military machine of the collective West. In this situation, I see it as necessary to make the following decision. This solution is fully adequate for the threats we face. That is, in order to defend our motherland, its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and to ensure the safety of our nation and our people in the liberated areas, I consider it necessary to support the decision of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff to conduct a partial mobilization within the Russian Federation. I repeat, this is about a partial mobilization. Municipal deputies of St. Petersburg. We believe that President Putin's decision to start a self-defense zone harms the security of Russia and its citizens. In this regard, we ask you, State Duma deputies, to come up with a proposal to bring charges of treason against the President of the Russian Federation in order to remove him from office. Alla Pugacheva, most successful Soviet-Russian pop singer of all time. Appealing to the Russian Ministry of Justice, I ask you to add me to your list of foreign agents of my beloved country, for I am in solidarity with my husband, Maxim Galkin, an honest, decent and sincere person, a real and incorruptible patriot of Russia, who wishes our motherland prosperity, peaceful life, freedom of speech, and an end to the death of our people for illusionary goals that make our country a rogue state and that make the lives of our citizens harder and harder. Alexei Navalny. My demand: stop the criminal war and idiotic mobilization. Mikhail Podolyak. Direct, deliberate strikes on critical civilian infrastructure, in particular on the largest combined heat and power plant, the Kharkiv TPP-5, is an unconditional manifestation of Russian terrorism and its desire to massively leave civilians without electricity and heat, such a cowardly response for the escape of his own army from the battlefield. Volodymyr Zelensky. Even in the darkness, Ukraine and the civilized world can clearly see these terrorist acts. Deliberate and cynical rocket attacks on civilian critical infrastructure, no military targets. Do you still think that we are one nation? Do you still think that you can scare us, break us make concessions? Read my lips. Without gas or without you? Without you. Without light or without you? Without you. Without water or without you? Without you. Without food or without you? Without you. Cold, hunger, darkness, and thirst are not as scary and deadly for us as your friendship and brotherhood. But history will put everything in its place, and we will be with gas, light, water, and food, and without you. Alexei Gurinov, Russian political prisoner, who said his last words in court after being sentenced to 7 years in prison for stating his anti-war opinion and criticizing the Russian army's actions in Ukraine. I want to plead guilty before the long-suffering people of Ukraine. Ruslan Tsinin, Russian who shot the military commissar of the local recruitment office. Now we will all go home and no one will have to fight. Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary. The war in Ukraine may continue until 2030. Ukraine may lose 1/3 or 50% of its territory. The war would have been local, but the West intervened and made it global. By imposing restrictions, Europe is shooting itself in the foot. Vladimir Putin. Politicians in Europe have to convince their fellow citizens to eat less, wash less often, and dress warmer at home. And those who begin to ask the fair question, why is that so, are immediately declared enemies, extremists, and radicals. Our state has already offended Russia by asking them to agree on coexistence based on equal, honest, worthy, and fair terms. Obviously, with this Russian president, this is impossible. He does not even know what dignity and honesty are. Therefore, we are ready for a dialogue with Russia, but with a different president of Russia. Vladimir Putin, addressing a paid crowd on stage at Red Square after formally recognizing 4 Ukrainian states as part of Russia, while simultaneously retreating from them. Now inhale, and at my command, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, Ura! 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 Sergei Pugachev, ex-oligarch and Putin's former friend and trusted member of his inner circle, answering Dmitry Gondon's question whether Putin is able to value human life. So I was sitting there with Putin and his wife Lyudmila in their kitchen in his Novogorovskaya mansion. I don't remember anymore what occasion it was, but we decided that it was appropriate to open a bottle of wine and drink it. So we finished one bottle and I suggested we open another one, but Lyudmila was telling me that we shouldn't. She said, please, let's leave it at that. Don't open another one. And he said, no, it's fine. I want to drink another one and you join us. So he basically got a bit excited. So we opened the second one. Lyudmila started to cry and left, and I didn't understand why. Just so you know, we were drinking Petrus red wine. You get it right, it's quite a good one, which I brought with me from France, and we were celebrating and drinking on something. I don't remember anymore what it was. Later on, when I was about to leave, I went to Lyudmila to say goodbye and asked her why she was upset. She was crying and sobbing. I asked her, what happened? What are you worried about? And she said, he should not drink. Don't you understand what kind of sadist he is? I said, what do you mean? She said, he is drunk. He will now start pinching me and squeezing me and show off all sorts of judo moves on me. She said, I won't be able to leave the house for a week because of all the bruises. So you get what I mean. This is something that is rooted deep inside him. It shows that something is wrong with him mentally. October. You can't blame everything on the intrigues of the Kremlin. Use your brains. Sanna Marin, Finnish Prime Minister, was asked what would be the way out of the conflict. The way out of the conflict is for Russia to leave Ukraine. That's the way out of the conflict. Abdi Alobdinov, commander of Ramzan Kadyrov's Chechen detachment Akhmat, gave a motivational speech to the new arriving volunteers, which seemed to be perceived as very effective, and therefore it was broadcasted nationwide on Russia's biggest state TV channel, Russia 1. All of us are the Spartans of the 21st century. We are the kind of people who do not retreat from our position, not even 1 meter. Who fights against us? People who say that Satan is their god. Satanists are fighting against us. People who insist that we have to attend LGBT parades, that our kids should be some sort of LGBT, that we would need to have gay parades. I believe that the men here are the very men who under no circumstances would want to see their children on gay parades. We are precisely those men who don't want to see our neighbors, our friends, ourselves as part of their world and their society. That's not who we are. We are the people who have a mom, dad, a family, a God, a religion, and all that the Almighty has given us. Guys, let's make sure that we arrive, take our position, repel the enemy, show him his place, which is on the ground. Those who manage to escape, let them run. When elite forces are advancing against us, they can have great gear on them. Guys, don't miss out on looting them. If our religion and love for the motherland demands it, are we ready to die? Soldiers shout, that's right! Is there anyone among us who is ready to surrender their position because they got scared? Soldiers shout, absolutely not! After this, I have no questions for you. Eero Epna, journalist at the Estonian weekly journal ST Express, interviewed the heads and several employees of Estonia's, Latvia's, and Lithuania's state security agencies and wrote, the cruel culture pervading Russia's modern army was entrenched during the era of Stalin's gulags. It isn't random but systematic. Rigid hierarchies and inability to account for variation, autocrats locked in information bubbles, and at the same time a population yearning for autocracy. which is perhaps the hardest aspect for Westerners to wrap their heads around. This has existed in Russia for centuries and will only persist. The Baltic counterintelligence directors don't only speak about Putin, but recall the reign of Peter the Great, who ordered all Swede-supporting Russians to be executed. Again, counterintelligence directors Sinizalu and Tuts chime in together with a Russian maxim: beat your own to frighten others. Violence is a historical pattern in Russia, and that will not change. Sinizalu calmly adds, human life has no value there. They only respect force, says Yunichkis. And if you answer theirs with your own, then you might even become friends. The principle is diametrically opposed to the suit and tie diplomacy and ordinary negotiations to which the West is accustomed. For Russia, both sides winning equals a loss, remarks an Estonian entrepreneur who has organized complex business transactions with Russians for decades. They need for there to always be winners and losers, even when negotiating, and only they may come out on top. Their diplomacy is a sign of weakness, says Mezhvits. Russia only recognizes force. It's hard for the West to understand, as Westerners hold different values and believe that others do as well. Anton Krasovsky, at that time moderator, editor, and director at Russia Today. Those Ukrainian children should be drowned in the Tisin River. That's right, drown these children. If they say Muscovites occupied us, you have to immediately throw these kids straight into the river with a violent, turbulent current. This might not be your way of handling it, as you are an intelligent person and a science fiction writer, but this is our way. There, in the Carpathians, each hut is called Smerekova hut. You need to put those kids straight into these huts and set those huts on fire. Vladimir Putin, on the question whether signing a formal decree regarding the ending of the partial mobilization is needed. I will talk to my lawyers. Frankly speaking, I did not even think about whether it was necessary to declare it by decree that the partial mobilization was completed, but it is completed. The point is set. Dmitry Peskov, answering the question where exactly the borders of the self-proclaimed new Russian territory are located. Partly, a clarification regarding the borders has already occurred. I will tell it to you in a less legal language. The Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics borders are the same as in 2014. In regards to Kherson and Zaporozhye, we will continue to consult with the local population of these regions to determine where the border will be located. G7 statement. The G7 firmly condemn and unequivocally reject the illegal attempted annexation by Russia of Ukraine's Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye and Kherson regions, in addition to the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. We solemnly reiterate that we will never recognize this illegal annexation or the sham referenda that Russia uses to justify it. UN General Assembly. Russia's illegal actions regarding the illegal referendums held on September 23rd to 27th, 2022 in the Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Luhansk and Kherson regions of Ukraine and the subsequent attempt to illegally annex these regions have no legal force and are not grounds for any change in the status of these regions of Ukraine. The UN General Assembly adopted a resolution that condemns Russia's illegal so-called referendums in regions within Ukraine's internationally recognized borders and demands it reverses its annexation declaration. The number of countries who voted in favor, 143. Abstentions, 35. Against, 5. Which are Belarus, North Korea, Nicaragua, Syria, and Russia. Kirill Strimousov served as deputy head of the Kherson Military Civilian Administration in Russian-occupied Ukraine from 26th of April 2022 until he mysteriously died in a car crash 2 days before Russia's retreat from Kherson. We will propose to Europe to hold referendums, just like in the Kherson region. France can join. Let it be the French Republic of the Russian Federation. Germany can join too. We are ready to preserve social rights for everyone, and we will provide the necessary amount of gas and fuel, so we can live again like we once did in the Soviet Union. Only this time, our territory will stretch from the Pacific to the Atlantic. There are no movements or advances. They will not enter Kherson. It is impossible. Vladimir Putin. Any alternative point of view is declared in the West as subversive propaganda and a threat to democracy. Everywhere they see an supposed intrigue of the Kremlin. Whatever comes from Russia is now all an intrigue of the Kremlin. Are we all that influential and powerful? This attitude is some kind of nonsense. How could it get that far? You can't blame everything on the intrigues of the Kremlin. Use your brains. Volodymyr Zelensky, referring to the explosion of the Crimean Bridge. Dear Ukrainians, today was a good and mostly sunny day on the territory of our state. It was about 20 degrees and sunny in large parts of the country. Unfortunately, it was cloudy in Crimea, although it was also warm. But no matter what the clouds are, Ukrainians know what to do, and they know that our future is sunny. This is a future without occupiers, throughout our territory, in particular in Crimea. If the occupiers flee while they have a chance, this will be the best option for them. If they are forced to stay, any occupier can find a way to surrender to Ukrainian captivity. We guarantee the preservation of lives to all Russian military servicemen who voluntarily lay down their arms and surrender. Ukraine always adheres to all international norms and conventions. We will not leave any other option for the occupiers to rely on. We are holding positions in Donbas, in particularly in the Bakhmut direction, where now it is very, very difficult. The fighting is very tough. The main intelligence directorate of Ukraine about the first mass rocket attack on Ukrainian cities. The Russian occupying forces received instructions from the Kremlin to prepare massive rocket strikes on the civilian infrastructure of Ukraine on October 2nd and 3rd. Military units of strategic and long-range aviation received orders to prepare for the task of massive rocket attacks. They targeted critical civilian infrastructure and the central regions of densely populated Ukrainian cities. November. If we manage to lose, The Hague is even waiting for the Kremlin's janitor. Roberta Metsola, European Parliament President. We move on to the resolution recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Vote is open. Vote is closed. And it is broadly adopted. Congratulations. Maria Kamichevich, resident of Ukraine, records herself in a dark flat during another power cut due to Russian shelling. I was wondering, when those liberators take away our electricity and all those comforts of the 21st century, they likely want us to protest against our government and ask them to surrender so we can have electricity again. But in fact, it goes something like that. You just sit in the darkness, like that, and it's boring because there's not much to do. And so you think to yourself, how fucked up all of you are. When the light turns on again, I will directly donate more money to the armed forces of Ukraine. Sergei Surovikin, commander of all Russian forces in the Russian invasion of Ukraine from October 2022 to January 23, announcing the surrender of Kherson. Comrade Defense Minister, I report. We have successfully countered all enemy offensive attempts. Comprehensively assessing the current situation, it is proposed to take up defense along the left bank of the Dnieper River. I understand that this is a very difficult decision. Alexei Aristovich. Let's be honest, the Russian army is not leaving Kherson. It was pushed back out of Kherson by the armed forces of Ukraine. Margarita Simonyan, chief editor of the Russian state-controlled media organization RT and Putin's favorite propagandist. If we manage to lose, The Hague, conditional or concrete, is even waiting for a janitor who sweeps the paving stones behind the Kremlin wall. What difference does it make for us if another district in Kiev remains without light or not? The scale of the catastrophe that our country will turn into if we manage to lose is unimaginable. Vladimir Putin, at a dinner table with alleged mothers of fallen soldiers, to Nina Pshenichkina, whose son died in Luhansk in 2019. But you know what comes to my mind? I already somehow mentioned this. About 30,000 people die in traffic accidents in our country, and about the same number from alcohol. And sometimes, unfortunately, this is how life develops. Life is complex and diverse. We are all under the Lord, under Allah, under Christ. I don't know, everyone who believes in higher powers, it doesn't matter what religion he adheres to. The important thing is that we are all mortal. We are all under the Lord. And someday, we all leave this world. This is inevitable. The question is how we lived our life. Some people live like it makes no difference if they have lived or not. And how they leave, from vodka or something else, is not clear. And then they just leave. Did they live or did they not? Life simply passed by unnoticed, regardless of whether a person lived or not. But your son lived. Do you understand? It means that he didn't go out of life for nothing either. Do you understand? In this sense, of course, his life turned out to be significant. It was lived with a result, and with the kind of result he was striving for. To give the viewer an idea of how exactly Ramzan Kadyrov is talking in Russian, the following is an accurate word-for-word translation of a video address of him in which he is trying to motivate Muslims in Russia to voluntarily join the war in Ukraine. Note that he likely suffers from OCD and cannot stop using the word Don excessively, which translates to "you get me, so it is." Who are you if you don't stand up today, Don, on this part, Don, against those wild dogs, Don, against those devils, against those Satanism, Don, fascism, Don, every mother, every Don father, every Don needs Don give their son, Don, to defend the interest, Don, of the Muslims and the Christians, to defend the interests and traditions of religions, Dawn. Hey, wake up, Dawn. Be real Muslims, Dawn. Be real men, Dawn. This war is a holy war. I dream of dying in this war. I die so that my children die in this war, holy Dawn. But we die only after we destroyed you, Dawn. Allahu Akbar, Ahmad Sila, victory will be on our side. Who ain't with us will be under us, Dawn. Evgeny Prigozhin, Putin's former chef and head of the terror organization PMC Wagner, reacting to the video of the execution of Evgeny Nuzhin, a Russian convict who was hired straight from prison by PMC Wagner and sent to Ukraine. Nuzhin deserted in Ukraine at the first chance, but was later on brutally killed with a sledgehammer in front of a camera to set an example. When asked about the execution video that turned up on a large pro-Wagner Telegram channel, Prigozhin commented, "As for the sledgehammered person, this video shows that he did not find happiness in Ukraine. Instead, he met unkind but fair people. It seems to me that this movie should be called A Dog Dies a Dog's Death. The directorial work is excellent. I watched it in one breath. I hope no animals were harmed during the production of this film." Andrei Lushak, Russian documentary filmmaker. Russian missiles are plunging Ukraine into darkness. Russia itself has long been living in darkness, now stubbornly dragging Ukrainians into it, who are desperately resisting. After the introduction of sanctions on energy resources, darkness became the main item of Russian export. There is not a single idea how to make this world a better place. No matter how many bombs the Russian army drops on the energy system of Ukraine, the country will have a bright future, and the Russians will face an endless bad trip, a long and painful plunge into the heart of darkness. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Security Council and former Russian president. Who is fighting against us? We fight against those who hate us, who are banning our language, our values, and even our faith, who are spreading hatred for the history of our motherland. Today, a part of a dying world is fighting against us. They are a bunch of insane Nazi drug addicts, a drugged and intimidated nation, and a large pack of barking dogs from the Western doghouse. With them is a diverse pack of grunting pigs and small-minded commoners from a collapsed Western empire with spit dripping down their chins from degeneracy. They have no faith and no ideals except their own made-up obscene habits and their own double standards of thought that deny the morals granted to normal people. So by rising up against them, we have gained sacred power. Volodymyr Zelensky. If someone offers us a way that will help return Crimea to our country by non-military means, then I will only be for it. If a suggested solution does not include the fact that all the Russian military will leave the territory of Crimea, then there is no need to waste time on it. We must return all lands. Alexei Navalny, talking about Surovikin, the commander of all Russian forces in the Russian invasion. General Sergei Surovikin, not only a war criminal, but also an ordinary thief. This so-called General Armageddon has already earned hundreds of millions of rubles in the war in Syria and has bought luxury housing for himself with this money. Now all the property of his family is simply classified. Maria Pevchikh and Georgy Alburov in a new investigation tell how one of the main military leaders of Russia lives and steals. December. Gerasimov is a faggot and a fucked up devil. There is nothing to blame us for. We have always considered the Ukrainian people a brotherly people. I still think so. What is happening is, of course, our common tragedy, but it is not the result of our policy. Olga Skabeyeva, TV moderator and one of the Kremlin's top propagandists, falsely reporting the situation in Europe during winter without Russian gas on Russian national TV. In Germany, before Christmas, absolutely all candles are sold out, but they were not panic bought due to the holiday atmosphere. It's just that the rationing Germans expect a blackout for the holidays and supply themselves with alternative light sources. The situation looks even worse in the United Kingdom. Due to the rising prices, the inhabitants of the town of Cardiff have started eating animal food, which they warm up on the radiators, while British women have gone a step further and started to prostitute themselves. They are having sex in order to survive. That is to say, they trade sex for food and heating. They have sex in order to survive. Alexander Kibovsky, minister of the Moscow government and head of Moscow's Department of Culture. We are fighting the Nazis. Therefore, it is correct to quote the lines of Konstantin Simonov. So kill at least one. So kill him fast. Whenever you see them, you have to kill them. So I say, work, my brothers. Vladimir Putin. A concentration of forces is now required from our counterintelligence agencies, including the military. It is necessary to strictly suppress the actions of foreign intelligence services, to quickly identify traitors, spies, and saboteurs. PMC Wagner mercenaries addressing the Russian Chief of the General Staff and Russian Deputy Defense Minister Valery Gerasimov from an artillery position near Bakhmut. You are a faggot and a fucked up devil. We have nothing to fight with. We have no shells. Our guys are dying there for us, and we are just sitting here bled and cannot help them. We need shells. We want to fuck everyone up. We are near Bakhmut and fighting against the entire Ukrainian army here. There is nothing else to call you, bled, except for one word: faggot. Vladimir Putin. 99.9% of our citizens are people who are ready to do everything in the interest of the motherland. This once again convinced me that Russia is a special country and special people who live here. Russian Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Vasilets, first Russian citizen to be charged under the criminal Article 332, which criminalizes military disobedience in the time of combat operations. It is better to go to jail, but not to commit these acts. Not to push subordinates to this. Many people think they have no choice. I want to say that there is always a choice. It's better to go to jail than to step over humanity. Dmitry Medvedev. These scumbags wish for the destruction of their own countrymen and their country on a daily basis. Those traitors who hate their own country so much that they call for its defeat and destruction must be regarded as enemies of the people, enemies of society. Such persons should not be allowed back into Russia for the rest of their lives. They should be completely cut off from sources of income in our country, no matter what they are. Over the info, Russian human rights media project aimed at combating political prosecutions. From January 1st to December 14th, 2022, 20,467 arrests for political reasons were recorded in Russia, out of which 19,478 were detained after February 24th for an anti-war position. The Pope. Our Ukrainian brothers and sisters celebrate this Christmas in darkness and cold, far from home, because of the devastation resulting from 10 months of war. Inspire us, Lord, to concrete acts of help to all who suffer these sufferings, and enlighten the minds of those in whose power it is to silence the roar of guns and immediately put an end to this senseless war. Vladimir Putin, on camera, slightly tipsy with a glass of champagne in his hand. All the nonsense, the information standoff, the informational throw-ins, all the fakes, they must stand aside. They should not prevent us from fulfilling our duty to our people. And you don't need to be particularly well versed in this informational confrontation to understand what's actually going on. There's a lot of noise right now about our strikes against the energy infrastructure of the neighboring country. Yes, we are doing it, but who started it? Who struck the Crimean Bridge? Dauken Zanatov, resident of Kazakhstan, during a video he posted on his social media account. Kremlin's top propagandist Solovyov said that we are fighting a war with NATO. NATO is already fully present in Ukraine, with their soldiers, military equipment and instructors. Just the US alone have over 1,500 HIMARS in their stock. And that's only what we know of. Plus Turkey, a NATO member. Do you think the Turkish army consists of 15 Bayraktars? No, far from it. Those 20 HIMARS that Ukraine got is the entire army of the US? Also no. Are the 5 Caesar artillery systems the entire army of France? No. In Ukraine, 113 international volunteers have died so far. The Russians themselves have confirmed that it's about 2,000. Do you believe that NATO consists of 2,000 people? The Turks alone have 1 million soldiers. Calm down, guys. You are fighting against Ukraine, with a small but very strong Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Russian grandmother, who was approached and interviewed on the street somewhere in Russia. My pension is very small, and it's not enough for anything. I get 15,000 rubles per month. If my daughter wouldn't help me, she has 3 kids herself, I would be standing on the streets and would be begging for money, thanks to Putin. A big thanks to him for that. They completely robbed the entire army. Now they take our kids and send them to war, and the parents have to buy all their clothes. The mothers have to use all their savings to equip their sons, and later on they have to pay for their son's funeral from their own pockets too. And then they somehow have to mentally deal with their loss. Is this what we have been working for all our lives? They just robbed the entire country. Ukrainian soldier who is being interviewed while sitting in a trench near Bakhmut. The fighting is cruel. I'll show you some videos later on where you can see how they are climbing over the dead bodies of their comrades. There is a Russian guy in the trench among corpses. He just sits there, has a smoke, and gets ready to die. You can shoot his head off, but his comrades will keep coming. They were threatened with being killed either way. Their comrades will kill them if they don't attack. We talked to POWs who say that executions are fairly common there. Those who refuse to attack are called defectors and are publicly executed by a firing squad in groups of 2 or 3. Sergei Sumliny, Russian-German expert who grew up in Russia and now works as head of the European Resilience Initiative Center in Berlin. Firstly, the Germans cannot imagine how the Ukrainian nation, which for many Germans did not exist until recently, wins a war against a nuclear state. Secondly, they cannot realize that the crimes committed by the Russian military in Ukraine are actually part of the Russian political worldview. They do not realize how many Russians do support such actions. It was easier for me to understand the actions of Russians in Ukraine because I was born in Russia and socialized there. I didn't doubt that Russia would attack Ukraine. I understood that destroying Ukraine is a fundamental value of Russian statehood. In general, for a normal person, and even more so for a German, it is terrifying to understand who the Russians are as a political community. The Russian worldview is based on violence, which is one of its top values. Not wealth, not health, not fun, but violence itself is their basic value. That is why the cult of war, disguised as the cult of victory, is so popular there. They honor Victory Day not because they saved their country. The idea of victory for the Russians is that we destroyed everyone. Our tanks marched across Europe. Russians also have a cult of sexualized violence, including the "we can do it again" car stickers, where 2 human figures are depicted in a position that apparently implies violence and rape. Victory for them is when you rape someone. Likewise in the current war. Ukrainians see victory when their country is saved and there are no more threats. Russians see victory when they enter the city, burn everything, rape, and move on. Moreover, very educated Russians fully share this concept of cannibalism, representatives of business, science, and culture integrated into the Western world. They see nothing wrong in destroying Mariupol or Kiev, striking a nuclear attack on Ukraine, in the established Russian filtration camps, in torture. But the Germans do not see this. They cannot imagine that this is possible. The Germans cannot believe it is about Russians' desire to physically destroy the Ukrainian nation and turn those who remain alive into Russians. Ukrainian woman Tatiana, who lost her home due to Russian shelling. Pain and misery. We have lived here all of our lives. For 32 years we've been living here, and in one moment, on one day, everything is destroyed. I'm sorry. When will it be rebuilt again? When will all of this end? It's unclear. I wish for no one to go through this kind of pain. We lived a normal life like everyone here, and now we are all homeless people. At least we have some kind of option to rebuild our home. But here, all those apartments have burned down completely. Where are people supposed to go? We will not forgive any one of them. And our son is also fighting in this war, and I am very worried about him. He said to me, "I will not forgive any one of them. We fight for our family and our children." Lev Gudkov, during an interview with Der Spiegel. Lev is a sociologist and pollster at Russia's only independent polling institute, the Levada Center. which in 2016 the Russian authorities classified as a so-called foreign agent. Most recently, the majority of respondents, 53%, believed that the military operation in Ukraine has been a success. These are mainly people who watch state television and have little access to the internet, older Russians. But there's also another smaller element of society, 1/3 of respondents, who say the operation has been unsuccessful. Der Spiegel asks, what reasons do people give for their skepticism? Gutkov answers, they say the operation is taking too long, that no progress has been made. People worry almost exclusively about their own country's military defeat, the chaos in the army, the incompetence of the leadership. For years, they were told that the Russian army was the strongest and had miracle weapons, but their myth has evaporated. Der Spiegel asks, the war itself isn't being questioned? Gutkov answers, no, the attacks on Ukraine and the massacres play no role. The Russians have little compassion for the Ukrainians. Almost no one here talks about the fact that people are being killed in Ukraine. Der Spiegel asks, can you quantify that? Gutkov answers, the share is just 1.5 to 2% of respondents, and only an average of 10% of the population feels guilty and shows empathy. Russian society is amoral. Of course, they don't want war, but people behave submissively, passively, and don't want to engage in open conflict with the state. Vladimir Putin during his traditional New Year's speech. Elites in the West have been lying to us about their aspirations for peace for years, including their efforts to assist to end the deadly conflict in Donbass. Instead, they actively supported the neo-Nazis, who persisted in using force and terrorism against peaceful residents in the Donbass People's Republics. The West misled us about peace while preparing for war. And they now have no qualms about admitting it out loud and cynically, using Ukraine and its people to destabilize and splinter Russia. We have never permitted anyone to do this before, and we won't now either. Currently, Russian service members, militia members, and volunteers are battling for their country, for justice and truth, and for solid assurances of world peace. They are all our heroes, and they are currently carrying the most weight. From the bottom of my heart, I wish a very happy new year to every participant in the special military operation, to those who are right here with me, right now, and who are on the front line, to those preparing for action at training facilities, to those who are in hospitals or have already returned home after completing their mission, to all those currently serving in combat in strategic units, and to all members of the Russian armed forces. I think it's significant that in Russia, virtues like kindness, solidarity, and proactive empathy have gained prominence in the past year. Russians are becoming more and more inclined to lend a hand without receiving any official instructions. They band together and act independently. Friends, now is the perfect opportunity to put all personal grudges and misunderstandings behind us, to express our feelings, love, and the importance of looking out for one another constantly and at all times. Let these sincere words and lofty sentiments offer each of us tremendous strength and assurance that working together we will overcome all the obstacles and maintain the greatness and independence of our nation. We won't stop until we have won the battle for Russia and the destiny of our one and only motherland. Friends, Happy New Year, Happy 2023. Volodymyr Zelensky during his New Year's speech. Dear Ukrainians, this year began on February 24th, without prefaces and preludes, sharply, early at 4 o'clock. It was dark, it was loud, it was hard for many and scary for some. 311 days have passed. It can still be dark, loud, and complicated for us, but we will definitely never be afraid again. And we will never be ashamed. It was our year of Ukraine, year of Ukrainians. We woke up on February 24th into another life, being another people, another Ukrainians. The first missiles finally destroyed the labyrinth of illusions. We saw who was who, what friends and enemies are capable of, and most importantly, what we are capable of. On February 24th, millions of us made a choice. Not a white flag, but a blue and yellow flag. Not escaping, but facing the enemy, resisting and fighting. The explosions on February 24th stunned us. We were told, you have no other option but to surrender. We say, we have no other option than to win. We have overcome the panic. We did not run away, but united. We have overcome doubts, despair, and fear. We believed in ourselves and in our strength. This year can be called a year of losses for Ukraine, for the whole of Europe, and the whole world. But it's wrong. We shouldn't say that. We haven't lost anything. It was taken from us. Ukraine did not lose its sons and daughters. They were taken away by murderers. Ukraine did not lose their homes. They were destroyed by terrorists. We did not lose our lands. They were occupied by invaders. The world did not lose peace. Russia destroyed it. I want to say to all of you, Ukrainians, you are incredible. See what you have done and what we are doing. How our soldiers have been smashing this second army of the world since the first days. How our people stopped their equipment and infantry columns. How an old man used his hands to stop a tank. How a woman knocked down a drone with a jar of tomatoes. How enemy tanks, armored personnel carriers, helicopters, shells were stolen during the occupation. How we fundraised for Shahed hunters, naval drones, armored vehicles, ambulance vehicles, and Bayraktar drones in several hours. How we withstood all threats, shelling, cluster bombs, cruise missiles, darkness, and cold. How we supported each other and the state. Is there anything that can scare us? No. Is there anyone who can stop us? No, because we are all together. It is what we are fighting for, one for each other. Dear Ukrainians, a few minutes remain until the new year. I want to wish all of us one thing, victory. And that's the main thing. One wish for all Ukrainians. Let this year be the year of return, the return of our people, soldiers to their families, prisoners to their homes, immigrants to their Ukraine, return of our lands, and the temporarily occupied will become forever free. Return to normal life, to happy moments without curfew, to earthly joys without air alerts, the return of what has been stolen from us, the childhood of our children, the peaceful old age of our parents, so that grandchildren come to visit their grandparents during the holidays, to eat watermelons in Kherson and the cherry in Melitopol, so that our cities are free. May the new year bring all this. We are ready to fight for it. That's why each of us is here. I'm here. We are here. You are here. Everyone is here. We are all Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Happy New Year. Dear viewers, subscribers, and friends of freedom, I would like to thank every one of you who watched this video until the end. In case you found this video interesting or informative, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let us hope that in this year, democracy and freedom will win over dictatorships and tyranny. Let us hope that Ukraine will be able to celebrate its deserved victory and that we will finally have peace again. Glory to Ukraine.